Welcome back to channel Skytech-Lens. It's rare for a US ambassador to publicly scold his host country, but that's exactly what Pete Hoekstra did in mid-September. In speeches to business leaders, Hoekstra accused Canadians of losing enthusiasm for the US-Canada relationship. He claimed the public had grown distant, even ungrateful, and labeled grassroots movements like Elbows Up as anti-American. Hoekstra's remarks weren't subtle. They were a calculated attempt to blame Canada for tensions and pressure Ottawa into a sweeping New Deal. The US, still in a MAGA mindset, wanted a broad agreement on minerals, steel, energy and more, but was frustrated by Canada's reluctance. This was classic negotiation: create a problem, assign blame, and push for your own solution. But these words landed in a Canada still wary from years of trade wars, and being called a security threat over steel and aluminium. Many saw Hoekstra's comments as gaslighting, misreading Canadian caution as hostility, and ignoring the reasons for public reserve. The ambassador's move was more than a complaint. It was a strategic shot meant to provoke and shift blame. But it fundamentally misunderstood the Canadian mood. Canadians weren't being petty, they were standing up for themselves. To grasp Canada's current coolness toward the US, look to recent history, not anti-Americanism. The Trump era's tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium, justified as national security, deeply damaged trust. Canadians saw their leaders insulted and their sovereignty treated as a bargaining chip. The Elbows Up movement was a grassroots response to feeling cornered, not a random outburst. This caution hasn't faded with new leadership. It's become a permanent stance. Canadians distinguish between Americans and the MAGA ideology. They reject being forced to accept a political agenda that undermines alliances and mutual respect. As Andrew Scheer noted, it's natural to push back when your industries and sovereignty are threatened. Today's reserve is a protective measure, not hostility. It's a pragmatic recognition that Canada must be vigilant and self-reliant in an unpredictable world. Prime Minister Mark Carney's response to Hoekstra was swift and unapologetic. He refused to be lectured, declaring Canada would not accept moral hypocrisy from Washington. Carney reframed the issue. Canada's caution was a reaction to American frustration, not weakness. He made it clear: Canada will engage as an equal, not a junior partner. Any deal must serve Canadian interests first. The super deal the US wanted was never on the table. Carney's stance was widely supported at home, tapping into a growing sense that Canada has been too deferential for too long. His words marked a new era. Canada will negotiate from strength, not supplication. The message to Washington was clear: the days of easy diplomatic wins are over. Canada's prosperity and independence are not up for negotiation. This was a line in the sand, and Canadians rallied behind it. At the core of Carney's approach is a renewed focus on Canadian sovereignty and interests. For decades, harmony with Washington often trumped Canadian priorities. Carney's doctrine flips that: the US relationship is a means to Canadian prosperity, not an end in itself. The new approach rests on three pillars: protect Canadian workers and industries, safeguard sovereignty, and negotiate on Canada's terms. No more accepting American standards by default or caving to high-pressure tactics. If a deal isn't in Canada's interest, Canada will walk away. This assertiveness unsettles Washington, but it's effective. The US hoped to quickly secure a broad agreement, especially on critical minerals, but found a patient, resolute Canada instead. This isn't about confrontation, it's about strategic assertiveness and equality. Canada is now a partner, not a pushover. Carney's leadership style is calm, firm, and strategic, a stark contrast to Washington's bluster. He projects control and reason, refusing to be rattled by provocation. Gone is the defensive posture of the past. Carney's team negotiates with quiet confidence and clear objectives. This methodical approach neutralizes pressure tactics and keeps the focus on substance. Carney's background in international finance brings precision and steadiness to diplomacy. Canada now negotiates from a position of economic strength, not rhetoric. Hoekstra's outburst reveals frustration that the old rules no longer apply. Washington faces a Canada that won't be swayed by threats or emotional appeals. The message: Canada is not intimidated and will stand its ground. Difficult conversations are welcome. Canada is ready. Canada's confidence is rooted in economic diversification, not just words. The Trump-era trade shocks pushed Canada to expand beyond U.S. dependence, forging new ties with Europe, Asia, and Mexico. Now threats of U.S. tariffs don't carry the same weight. Domestically, Canada has invested in critical minerals, energy, and agriculture, building self-sufficiency and new export markets. Canada is no longer just a supplier for the U.S., it's a global economic player. This diversification gives Canada real leverage in negotiations. Hoekstra's frustration reflects Washington's realization. Canada is no longer a captive market. Canada is charting its own course. Washington's push for a super deal, granting the U.S. preferential access to Canadian resources, was a non-starter. Carney made it clear the proposal failed the basic test of serving Canadian interests. The U.S. wanted Canada as a resource depot, limiting our ability to trade and develop industries. Agreeing would have meant surrendering economic sovereignty and undermining diversification. Ottawa insists resources be developed sustainably, with Indigenous consultation and broad economic benefits. The U.S. model threatened these priorities. Carney's rejection signals Canada won't accept junior partner status. Partnership must be reciprocal. If the U.S. wants more, it must offer real concessions. Canadians quickly pushed back on Hoekstra's anti-Americanism charge. The real issue isn't hostility toward Americans, but opposition to the MAGA ideology. Canadians value deep ties with the U.S., but reject aggressive, unreliable politics that undermine alliances. The Trump-era's tariffs and insults eroded trust, teaching Canadians that friendly relations can be upended overnight. The current reserve is a learned defense, not an emotional outburst. Hoekstra conflates opposition to a political agenda with rejection of a nation, missing the point. Canadians draw a line between friendship with Americans and frustration with U.S. politics. It's a rejection of policy, not people. The distinction is crucial and widely understood in Canada. The Hoekstra-Carney exchange marks a turning point in U.S.-Canada relations. The era of Canadian deference is over. Canada now acts from a position of strength and self-assurance. This moment codifies a new reality. Canada is a middle power with a diversified economy and global reach. Carney's calm, firm rejection of U.S. pressure is the result of years of building resilience. The episode unified Canadians around sovereignty and self-respect, resonating across the political spectrum. Standing up for Canadian interests is now a national, not partisan, issue. This clash signals Canada's maturation as a sovereign nation, ready to engage the world on its own terms. The response to U.S. criticism is confident and clear-eyed. It's not about conflict, but about redefining the relationship as a partnership of equals. This is a pivotal step in shaping Canada's foreign policy and identity for years to come. Thanks for watching. Subscribe the channel for more updates.